So the special event is over, and they finally unveiled the first trailer for Z of the Recapture. I mean, Rosa of the Recapture. The name change occurred because of recent events. I wonder what they could be referring to. Anyways, there's a ton of stuff to go over, and I will be moving around this trailer while doing it. All the theories I mentioned in this video are pure speculation, so don't consider it canon until the films themselves confirm it. You heard that right, films. Because unless I misinterpreted this, Rosa of the Recapture will follow Akito the Exile's footsteps by having a series of films to tell its story, in this case 4 of them, with the first one to air on May 4th, 2024. These films take place sometime after Lelouch of the Resurrection. For those playing catch up, that's the sequel of the 3 recap films from the alternative anime universe, and don't worry, I will cover how all that works in a later video. For now, it's not clear from the trailer exactly how long it's been since that film, but based on the technology we see, it's probably only been a few years. What's easier to figure out is where this takes place, which looks to be the EU, a region we spent a lot of time in during the events of Akito the Exiled. Hopefully we'll get a cameo from those characters. Here's how I came to this conclusion. The environment has the same look as what we saw in Akito the Exiled. These brand new nightmare frames are like the Liverpools, which are an exclusive nightmare frame to the EU forces. Ash's outfit looks like the ones worn by members of the W0 unit, both in design and its colors. I also noticed these marks on Ash and Rosa's nightmare frame, the Apollo, which appeared on other EU nightmare frames. Even the nightmare frame itself has an EU look to it, but we'll get back to that later because now we gotta talk about the new characters. So first there's Ash and Rosa, who are of course brothers. It seems like every story in Code Geass has to involve siblings except for Renya, who's all alone. By the way, the name Rosa is supposed to be 0 spelled backwards, which is odd because it isn't. Orez would be 0 backwards. This is just rearranging the letters. Whatever. I'm not sure how I feel about them sporting Yu-Gi-Oh! Like hairstyles, but at least their designs are great. Ash in particular looks like a combination of Ryo, Jeremiah, Shinkai, and Totsuya. Rosa shares a similar face to Suzaku, but has a much slimmer build. But he does have Zero's flair for the theatrics, so I kinda like that aspect to him. I assume then that the brothers are Japanese, which is somewhat confirmed by the translated subtitles. Based on the limited amount of dialogue, I concluded that Rosa acts like Cecile, supporting Ash on missions where Ash pilots the nightmare frame called Apollo. The trailer itself somewhat proves this because Ash does say that everything went according to your plan, and by your, I assume he means Rosa. So maybe Rosa is like Lelouch in coming out with elaborate strategies. We're also introduced to this new female character, first in this scene where Ash and Rosa walk into an abandoned theater, and later on we see Rosa waving to someone who most likely is the same girl because that's probably the same scene. She of course has friends who hug her in this scene, and it wouldn't be Code Geass without fan service because one of her friends is blessed and wears very revealing clothing. Aside from that, she seems to be more of a reserved character, especially when compared to her friends. Next, there's this potential rogue officer who's shown from a distance killing civilians along with another Britannian soldier. Could be Euro Britannians, I'm not sure. And finally, we meet 2 new Nightmare Frame pilots, a man and a woman. This guy looks insane, giving off Bradley vibes. I sure hope he's better written. And then there's the girl who wears a particularly interesting outfit. Of course, she's well endowed. Her design reminds me of Elena from Eureka 7 AO, an anime you probably never heard of. Both of their pilot uniforms aren't like the ones worn by the EU, Britannia, the Chinese Federation, or the Japanese. So maybe they're part of some mercenary organization not associated with any specific government. Let's move on from the characters to talk about the nightmare frames, which were the biggest part of the trailer. Starting with the brand new nightmare frame that Ash pilots, which is called the Apollo, which looks absolutely amazing. It has such a unique design design, and the red and blue color palette fits it perfectly. Some of its designs resemble the EU Gloucesters, particularly with the headpiece and the chest components. It has the same flexibility as the Alexanders, and part of its eyelights remind me of the Alexanders. Just further proof that this story must take place in the EU. But back to the flexibility. Several times in the trailer, the Apollo folds its legs and travels like a motorcycle. So just like the Alexanders and Akito the Exiled, the battles here are going to be more intense because the Apollo has similar mobility. This motorcycle mode reminded me a little of the Tristan, Shinkiro, Alexanders, and the Vercingetorix. Maybe that's the Megista Zeta mode. This nightmare frame displays this brand new mode on the monitor from the cockpit in the scene where Ash is piloting it. In case you forgot, in Lelouch of the Resurrection, Xiaoyu piloted the Nagishu main, which had an ability called the Megista Omega. This allowed it to travel fast enough to create after images. I wonder if the mode here does the same thing, only it doesn't travel as fast. It seems like an earlier version of that same mode. The Apollo also has impressive jumping abilities as shown here. Anyways, while in this mode, Ash takes out these EU nightmare frames, and from the trailer we can see that the Apollo has several weapons, including a gun that reminds me of the Varus cannon, only it fires purple blasts instead of green. Then it has long impressive swords like the EU nightmare frames or even the Galahad, and this impressive side blade that I'm just going to call the Predator blade, because with it Ash literally rips out the nightmare frame cockpits just like the Predator rips out heads from people's bodies. Is Rosa of the Recapture referencing Predator? Probably not, but I'm going with it anyways. My favorite part with the Apollo is early on, when we get a nod to the Lancelot with the way it starts up. Next, we got introduced to other new nightmare frames. The first are these simple EU nightmare frames, most likely piloted by the average soldiers. Their design seems to emphasize speed over durability. Then we get this blue nightmare frame, which I think has an attachment on the back, which we can see later on in the trailer on its own. The colors of the one in the later scenes are different, but the designs are close enough. Anyways, that blue nightmare frame has a similar style shields to the Nagishu main, and just like the Nagishu main, this nightmare frame is designed for mostly melee combat, and I assume that Blue Boy pilots it, especially since its fighting style is quite crazy. Other than that, it's hard to say what it reminds me of given its unique design, and it seems like it's gonna be quite a challenge for the Apollo to take out. Then there's the nightmare frame that is shown right after we see Elena's doppelganger, and I assume that nightmare frame belongs to her. This nightmare frame, like the others in this trailer, don't have a float unit, but it can glide in the air. It also has the same 3 lights on the helmet that nightmare frames like the Vincent has. And on some level it reminded me of the Mordred, but a slimmer version, which is why I immediately thought of the Meowdred from Lost Stories when watching the trailer. Just like Blue Boy's nightmare frame, I don't have much else to say about this one. I want to wait until we get more footage of it to come up with more theories. Now let's talk about the plot, which is largely unknown, but I have some theories of what it could be based on this trailer. I think Ash and Rosa are mercenaries or maybe part of a small group like the Special Corps or the Peace Mark. That would explain why they have to travel in a truck, since they have to keep the Apollo somewhere. According to the subtitles, Rosa says that the request came to him. I am confused about what he meant by brother killed too many Japanese people, but it sounds like they are protecting the Japanese since we again see them slaughtered by soldiers, but I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Anyways, I assume that along their travels, Ash and Rosa meet that girl and the 3 join forces. Perhaps they are taking on that rogue group I mentioned earlier that Blue Boy and Elena's doppelganger are from. Perhaps that battle with the Blue Nightmare frame was part of that. This might be what Lloyd meant by war in torn countries. Now, this is only one part of the puzzle since we didn't see any other characters on the poster, and I'm referring to, of course, the Shao ripoff and the woman who looks like she has a connection to Gias. Maybe this relates to Rosa's necklace, but who knows. Something tells me that these films won't cover the same scale of conflict as in the original series or even Akito the Exiled, given how there's only 4 of them. Now to my thoughts on all of this. It seems like on one end, this is exactly what I want. A brand new story with new characters in a new setting. We're getting awesome nightmare frames and expanding the lore. On the other end, this trailer also made me a bit nervous. Some parts concern me. Starting with the nightmare frame CGI, which can sometimes make the fighting difficult to follow. It's not Akito bad, but it's not the best either. I really miss the old Code Geass animation for the nightmare frames. Moving on, how's the plot gonna tie into the past events? Right now, there doesn't seem to be much to go on. For my next concern, I'm wondering if 4 films will be enough to tell a complete story. I guess that's equivalent to an 8 to 12 episode series, depending on each film's length. We'll have to see, I guess. Next, and this is purely subjective, but just from observation on watching this trailer, it didn't feel like Code Geass to me. Not just the lack of Geass itself, but the feel of it. The art style is there, but the soul isn't. It's hard for me to put this into words, but something just felt off. It could be the heavy focus on Nightmare Frame combat, maybe the lack of story, I'm not sure, but something was definitely off to me. But out of curiosity, I rewatched the Akito trailers and it had a completely different vibe to it, so I'm not sure what happened here. As the months go on, as we enter 2024, we'll get more trailers and information that will hopefully remove the doubts I have about these upcoming films, OVAs, or whatever you want to call them. Let me know your thoughts on the trailer and what you hope to see in Rosa of the Recapture. If you want to know what mine are, check out this video right here.